What's going on, everyone? Mutant Cowboy here. Hope you're all having a great weekend. I am still unable to play the Division 2. Obviously, I'm just unable to connect and actually just unable to stay connected to the game. It keeps constantly giving me error codes and disconnecting me. Now, on the off chance that this is not just a Division specific issue, maybe it's, my own personal setup issue. I have contacted, my internet service provider. I've contacted the manufacturer of the router, and, I'm just trying to work on different issues and get things fixed. Until I get it resolved, I can't really do anything, and that includes farming for gear that I want and basically making the builds that I want and, getting the footage that I need. So unfortunately, what I'm doing is basically just working with what I got because, well, since I can't actually play the game, I got a bunch of time on my hands and I might as well just make some videos. Now, unfortunately, this video, again, is not finished. It was basically kind of like the beta version of the build that I was working on, and it was actually kind of enjoyable. I'm not going to lie. It was just kind of something I mentioned in passing during that last Pestilence video that I made. And I kind of just said, maybe it's not worth it to just invest everything into damage. Maybe you should make a minion build, having turret drone and using the pestilence stacks is kind of like the third minion dealing damage while you're not actually shooting things. And so I actually kind of started trying to put that together, and I was kind of going through various pieces and kind of testing out what would feel better, or at least what would provide me with the best overall bonuses for the build. Obviously, if you're going with skills and weapon, obviously it's going to be a very specific combination of things that you need to add. Of course, if you're familiar with the Pestilence, you know that the only thing that really buffs Pestilence is something that says weapon damage on it. So your red weapon damage rolls is basically the number one thing that's going to give you damage. And then if you have some talents that are going to give you weapon damage, total weapon damage, or amplified weapon damage, then that's going to further buff the amount of damage that your Pestilence stacks can do. Of course, if you're on like a team or something, yeah, any additional buffs that they can give you, that's great too. But we're talking about mostly self-buffed damage here. But anyway, yeah, I was having a lot of fun with this build. It was working out really well. The biggest problem that I was actually having was just the simple fact that I had played too much Countdown. That's on me. I played so much Countdown this last weekend, basically just became accustomed to being unkillable, and I completely forgot about reds and purples existing, and I forgot that I wasn't using a super tanky protection from elites build, and of course I ended up falling victim to that the first couple times I attempted this build. However, after I kind of adjusted myself and got myself out of the Countdown mindset, I really started seeing, the potential of this build. I mean, it wasn't the tankiest build, of course it's not, and it's not designed to be tanky, but it was strong, and it was actually pretty enjoyable. I mean, look, I know a lot of people love using the hybrid builds, especially something like Capacitor with crit chance and crit damage. Capacitor is obviously using, your skill tiers for weapon damage, and you can get fantastic results doing that. Your skills are still pretty strong, and it's wonderful, right? And of course, if you're in PvP, the hybrid that you usually find is you've got just full armor builds with crit chance and crit damage, because that's just how PvP goes. But you're never really going to see weapon damage and skill damage, because for the most part, the bonuses that you're getting on tier 0 or tier 1 skills with, let's say 6 rolls of skill damage are pretty bad. I mean, the skill damage on a base skill is really bad, and then adding 60% to really bad is just 60% better than really bad. It requires multiple buffs. We're talking about like 200, 300% damage to make some of these skills impressive. And just the fact that you're, not able to do that for the most part makes it kind of lackluster. Well, however, for the Pestilence, the key thing is that, you're generally not relying on impressive damage per bullet. Right? The whole thing with the Pestilence is that you want to build this massive stack on many enemies, and as if they're the tankier they are, obviously you can keep multiple stacks on different enemies, and you can spread on these huge 50 stack Pestilence damage dealing monsters to pretty much every enemy around, and that can work out really great. Obviously, you're going to have huge damage ticks all over the place on as many people as you can basically keep these stacks on. So the tankier they are, the more enemies you can basically just keep these stacks on. And, you know, for the weaker enemies, it's just going to drop them and then spread to something else, right? So, I mean, it really just depends on your circumstances, how many stacks you can actually keep going at the same time. But when you add the turret and the drone, then, of course, you know, you've just got 2 more additional sources of damage on top of every stack that you can keep up. And it really kind of provides just this nice little orchestra, if you will, of keeping this thing, you know, going on this target and then keeping it going on this target while your drone's doing this and your turret's doing that. And it's fun. It's interesting. I like it. Now, as far as the actual results for this build go, it was actually pretty impressive. I wasn't expecting to be dealing this much damage. Again, this was a test run before the build is complete. You know, most of the stats are there. Most of everything that I want is there. But it's not 100% in stone. But even if it was, I was kind of, you know, going into this like, yeah, it's going to be a good build. It's going to be fun, you know, distract the enemies a little bit. But it's not going to be, you know, like a huge damage beast of a build. At least, you know, I didn't think it was going to be. However, once I actually got to that end screen, I was actually kind of surprised to see that I had the most kills, that I had the highest amount of damage dealt, and honestly, I'm gonna say this. I don't know if that skill damage dealt is including the pestilence stacks or if it's just the turret and the drone. I don't know how that actually works. But yeah, I was not expecting my weak skills to be doing this much. So that the pestilence stacks must have been influencing that. I mean, there's just no way that my skills are responsible for 500 million and my bullet damage is responsible for less than 300 million. You know, like I was just like, wow, okay. But obviously the first thing that we're going to look at is, you know, is the pestilence. Obviously that's just the main, you know, focus of the build, trying to build up the pestilence. And then everything else is kind of supporting that and trying to support the skills. And I'm going to actually be doing this in order of, I think, easiest to farm for, okay? And that, of course, basically starts off with the memento. You know, once you get a memento, obviously everything's rolled for you. And that's just the greatest backpack for this build, I think, because it's the only backpack that really provides a buff to weapons and to skills. Then you got the gloves, contractors. Only thing you need to do here is get those and roll them in skill damage. The mask, a little bit trickier, but you just need something that has either armor regen and skill damage on it, and then you just roll the other stat that you need. And this is basically what you want for as many pieces as you can get it on. Armor regen and skill damage are what I'm going for on this build because it basically just, you know, caps off what Memento does. Armor regen, weapon damage, and skill damage. And then, of course, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get Picaro's holster with skill damage on it. And if I could, I'd probably roll a skill tier onto that armor. But, you know, we'll see if I can actually end up getting that piece here in the future. But yeah, farming name pieces can be a little bit difficult for the exact rolls. Now, starting to get really difficult here, these knee pads from Brazos. Yeah, you have to get, obviously, a Brazos with armor regen and skill damage, so then you can then change the armor core to weapon damage to boost your pestilence. So this is going to be a little bit difficult. This is going to require a lot of farming. Weapon handling isn't a bad roll, especially on an LMG, but again, I'm still trying to find one with skill damage and armor regen. And then moving into the chest, this is probably going to be, you know, just the most difficult piece to get because yes, you get to keep the weapon damage on there, but you still need it to roll with skill damage, regen, and you need to be able to get, you know, that talent rolled in the correct way. So I'm going with Overwatch because, again, this is one of the few talents that actually provides damage to both your weapon and your skills. So overall, I would say that, you know, the knees and the chest piece are going to be the biggest difficulty in basically finding them because they're not unicorns, but they can be pretty rough. Now, if you got lucky and you found a Brazos chest piece and Walker Harris knee pads that matched your criteria, go with it. You can get these pieces in any order you want them to be. At least you can get the mask, the chest, and the knee pads to be whichever, you know, whatever selection you can get. But I think it's just going to be easier if you get the Brazos as either a knee pad or a mask. That way you don't have to worry about the talent as well. But either way, it's a little bit of a difficult build to grind for. I'm not going to lie. But again, I think the fun thing about the Division is just grinding for that gear and trying to perfect your build. So if you need something to do and you're like, oh, I want a fun build that gives me kind of like the best of everything, give me some good skills, give me the ability to shoot a weapon and deal some, significant damage because I'm doing that. Reward me, basically. Reward me for proper positioning, reward me for using these skills the right way, reward me for shooting my gun, the kind of the trifecta of everything in the Division, right? So this kind of build, if you're looking for something a little bit new and a little bit interesting, I think is going to be a lot of fun for you. Now, I'm not going to say this is like a legendary build. I mean, there's nothing stopping you from using it in legendary if you got a good team, backing you up. It looks like it could do some work. I mean, yeah, turret and drone and legendary is a popular choice. But anyway, this is more like just a fun build to put together and see how it works for you and, farm some other stuff, I guess. That's really, at the end of the day, that's what most people do. Most people are not sitting there farming legendaries all day long. And the reason for it is because, well, the rewards of legendary are not really that great. So, most people just find it, to be wasting their time if they're looking for gear. So most people are going to be farming Countdown. Most people are going to be farming Summit, maybe even control points. And for all of those activities, well, maybe not Countdown. I guess probably, I'm going to take back the Countdown. For Summit or for, the control points, this build is probably just going to be fantastic. If you're doing, even if you're doing just regular missions with your friends, I think this build is still going to be good, because you are still giving them a little bit of a buff with that Overwatch talent. So, you get to be a little bit of a team buffer, but mostly, you're kind of selfish. Either way, it's still going to be great. It's still going to be fun, and hopefully you guys end up enjoying it. Now, again, I don't know how original this build is, obviously, because, these pieces have been around forever, so I don't know if anyone's, I don't know if people really have tried this combination and don't like it, or if people have tried this combination and really love it. But if you've never done it, like me, I've never put this combination together. So, for me, it's interesting, it's fun. And if you haven't done it, I would assume you're probably going to have fun and find it enjoyable. Whether you're a weapon damage guy or whether you're a skill damage person. I think the only people that really wouldn't enjoy this build are probably like full support builds. Like if you only like being a healer or you only like being, I guess, like a tank build, then yeah, you might not really enjoy this build. But that's a very small portion of the population. Look, I love support builds and I love healers, but it's not all I want to play. So I think that this build would probably please basically just a wide population of the game. But either way, thank you guys for watching. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get all of the roles and all the pieces I want currently just because I can't play the game. But thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.